Hi guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Kyra and today I'm bringing to you the 10 palettes that I would keep if I could only keep 10. This challenge was created by Annette from Annette's Makeup Corner. I love me some Annette. I'm gonna link her and her original video down below, and let's go ahead and get into it. The idea here is not necessarily to pick your 10 favorite palettes, and that is very much the case with the 10 palettes that I picked today. You're more looking at, if you could only keep 10 eyeshadow palettes, how would you make a complete collection of shadows out of those 10 palettes? Each of these palettes I've picked for a different reason. And the first one is the Charlotte Tilbury Starry Eyes to Hypnotize palette from holiday of 2019. I haven't had this puppy very long. The reason I picked this palette is I feel like almost every color in this palette could be a one shadow look if I wanted it to be. We do have some nice neutrals in here, but also some nice color as well. The only shadow I don't think I would use for a one shadow look is actually this deep navy blue matte shadow. And the only reason is I just don't go for one shadow looks that deep. So that's the exception, but every single one of the rest of these, including the other two mattes, I feel like I could use for a very quick one shadow look, add some mascara, maybe liner, a lip, and get out the door. So I'm keeping this. Also possibly because it's new and it's beautiful, but I had to include it because it's probably one of the only palettes in my collection that I feel like I could do one shadow looks with the entire palette. Second palette may come as no surprise to you. This was a first place award winner in my first Journey in Beauty Awards, and this was a second place winner in my second Journey in Beauty Awards. And it is the Persona Identity palette. This is what it looks like. You may be able to tell that there's a lot of dips in here, and the reason that is because this is not only my go-to neutral palette, but it's also one of my go-to glam palettes. I just feel glamorous, gorgeous, timeless, like classic beauty when I use this palette, and so there's no way I wasn't going to pick this palette of one of my 10. And I'm calling this kind of my staple neutral palette. All right, so the next 4 palettes, I kind of had to break this down a little bit because when I was telling my brain that I needed to pick 10 and only 10 eyeshadow palettes out of my collection, I just didn't really know where to start. So then I started thinking, what if I picked a palette for each of the 4 seasons? Let's just go ahead and start with my winter palette, and that is a palette that I had in my Shop My Stash for the month of December. I'll link that video in case you missed it, but it is the Too Faced Chocolate Gold palette, and this is also one of my go-to glam palettes.
So I felt really good about including
this one. I think this is a beautiful palette. I love all the glittery, really high shine metallics in this palette. I love that you just have the basics in terms of matte and the rest is all shimmer. And I included it as my winter palette mostly because Christmas, winter, glam all seem to be kind of synonymous in my life. My spring palette is the ABH and Carly Bible palette. I really like the packaging, but what I love about this palette the most is how soft the looks come out for me. Even this little bit deeper shade called Bowie here is actually very easy to keep it light. You have to almost really build it and work at it to get it to be very dark or even as dark as it appears in the pan. And so for me, this is the perfect spring palette. You have a nice array of pinks, you have some warm shades, you have some beautiful blues and purple shades. I love this really light gold shade right here called Moo, and I honestly can't wait to use this coming spring this year because I think it's perfect. It's the perfect spring palette. I feel like it has the perfect balance of shimmer to matte in here, and I really do feel like it adds something to my array of palettes that none of the rest of the palettes do. My summer palette might be quite a blast from the past because it is the Violet Voss Flamingo palette. I still love this thing, and I definitely, if you say name your #1 summer palette in your collection, it would be this one, and I think you can probably see why. I also think this is actually really nice for winter and spring too, because you do have some really nice pastel shades in this palette that you could pair with soft mattes. And I don't know, I guess I don't only think of pastels for spring or summer in this case, I also think of them for winter. So again, I feel like this adds a lot of versatility to my collection of only 10 palettes. And I also really like the metallic formula in here. It's really nice and easy to work with. I feel like you have some staple shades in here as well, like probably these 4 right here. I love this palette, I love this formula, and I would love to play with this all summer long. And then last for the seasonal palettes, this just happened to work like a dream. I was really hoping to include this palette in my 10, but I wasn't for sure if it was going to be a good fit or not. But for my fall palette, I chose the Natasha Denona Lila palette. Lila, who knows? And to me, I just love these tones for fall. I mean, I love these tones all together, but I especially love jewel tones for fall, even into early winter. And these are just perfect for me. This has a little bit of a greenish tone. You've got your classic gold, you've got a duochrome orangey pink shade, some purples. And I also really love the array of mattes that are in this palette. You got this nice burnt red shade, some browns, another cooler brown. I love this palette. I think it would work perfectly for a fall palette, but I also feel like it adds a lot of value to my collection because I really love the mattes in both of my Natasha Denona palettes. I'm just really glad that I found a way for this to be included in my small 10 palette collection. And you know, it fits the bill as a fall palette, but it also just fits my bill. It fits me as a person with my aesthetic, the things that I like to wear on my eyeballs. So there you go. So the next 3 palettes may surprise you. These definitely are not all 3 favorites. One of them is definitely a fave, but the other 2 are not necessarily favorites. And I'll tell you why I chose these in just a moment, but it is the ABH Norvina volumes 1, 2, and 3. These things are hefty, man. I could really do some kind of a workout and probably should. Anywho, the volume 1 is definitely a favorite for me. These tones are right up my alley, and more than that, this formula is phenomenal. I've talked about it before. Definitely not consistent with your regular ABH palettes. Not the same formula at all, but a beautiful, pigmented, smooth, and easy to use formula it is. And like I said, these are just my shades. I like the burgundies, I like the berries, I like the more reddish purple shades, definitely dig in the yellows and a little bit of orange. And so overall, this palette is just a huge, huge hit for me. And the other thing it has going on for it is this white. I don't know why I said it that way. The other thing it has going for this is this white shade right here. This is the most soft but amazing white matte in my collection. It works beautifully for lightening other shades in the palette, but it also works so beautifully as a highlight in the inner corner of the eye or the brow bone. It's very, very brightening, but without looking like a matte. Like, it's so brightening it almost looks at least satin, if not shimmery. The reason I kept the other 2 palettes is because I look at these probably very different than other people look at these. When I look at these with my painter's eye, I see a palette of paints. I see that between the three of these, I feel like I have all the colorful eyeshadows that I could ever want. Even though there are some colorful eyeshadows in some of the palettes that I chose, especially in terms of mattes. My son's taking the trash out and laughing at me. Especially in terms of the matte shadows in these three palettes, I feel like if I put them all together in one gigantic palette, it would be all of the matte shades in terms of colors, bright colors that I could ever need. And then I think the other palettes in my collection that I've already shown you would fill in the rest of those mattes in terms of neutrals or a little bit more muted tones. So I really like this one as well. I definitely haven't gotten as good a use out of that one as I have with the other two. This is volume 3, and this is said to be a fall color story. So again, this would be beautiful for fall or any time. But these again are definitely my tones. I love like corals and berries and purples and things like that. So I've definitely gotten some good use out of this. Definitely plan to get more good use in the new year, just when you're seeing this. But I love them, and I think it'd be fun to really bring in some of the art of makeup videos through these three palettes as well, because you know, I feel like we can touch on things like how to work with fluorescent shadows and things like that in a way that's user-friendly, wearable, whatever that means, and so on and so forth, and not intimidating. So that is why I am keeping these beautiful three palettes that I spent an obscene amount of money on, because and that literally is the reason why I bought them, but it's also the reason why I'm including them in this small collection. And then the very last palette, number 10, and these of course were in no particular order. This palette I included simply because I love it, because it was a beautiful gift, because I can't see having a collection of eyeshadows without this one included. I mean, it definitely brings something special to the table overall, but there are definitely things in this palette, and maybe even predominantly things in this palette, that are more practical or useful versus, you know, light of my life, crown jewel, and all of that. It's the Natasha Denona Gold palette. Both of my Natasha Denona palettes were gifts from my husband, and that's a good part of why they're so special to me. But they're also special to me because I am just overjoyed with the formulas within these two palettes of hers that I own. You know, I definitely think these two shades, as well as a couple other in this palette, are light of my life, crown jewels of my collection, just beautiful, beautiful shadows. But mostly I just can't see owning an eyeshadow collection, or if I had to give away every other palette, I could not give this palette away. I just couldn't. I love it that much. I use it a lot when I'm not filming, and I try to incorporate it when I am filming as much as I can. So these are my 10 palettes. Let me know how you think I did. I'm going to include a picture right here of all of the palettes laid out on my bed. So, you know, this is not professional lighting or anything like that, but I just want to give you a complete overview of the colors that I have within my collection. Thank goodness, hypothetical collection of only 10 eyeshadow palettes. I am a complete and utter eyeshadow enthusiast by nature, apparently, so this exercise would absolutely break my heart if it became a truth, but these are just things. There are other palettes that I think would have fallen into the 10 slots here had I had more time with them. I had a real influx of things during November and December of last year. So like I said, I may do this at the end of the year. Wouldn't that be fun if I did this video again at the end of 2020 and just see, you know, what, if anything, has changed. As a reminder, I'm only purchasing 6 eyeshadow palettes in this year of 2020. So, you know, it'll be based on a small amount of influx of palettes, but also just trying all the stuff that's in my collection that I really haven't given a good shape. So thank you, Annette, for coming up with this fantastic exercise. I love this idea. I think that this type of exercise is very telling. It's very enlightening. Thank you guys so much for spending part of your day here with me today. I really appreciate each and every single one of you, and I hope all of your makeup days are absolutely beautiful eyeshadow makeup days, and I will see you in my next video real soon.